Good morning, Emily. How are you doing, girl? Wow. Okay. So today is Tuesday, the 25th of September, 2018. Welcome to the fall season. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're enjoying your time at school. I was at school yesterday at my machining class at Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria, and we were. I used the lathe, and I was forming plastic materials into a toy top. That's right. That's our project for our class. We're creating toys, and at least this toy top using the lathe, and I'm learning how to use this machine. It's huge, and it's pretty amazing. It's a little bit intimidating. These machines are powerful, and they are, they're very useful, but they have a capacity to do much physical harm. It's really amazing how, one false move and the lathe or the mill can do some damage to you physically. So, it's important to pay very close attention, to focus on what the machine is doing and the settings and the dials and the adjustments and making sure that they're just right. And, you know, I'm cautious. I try not to make mistakes on the machine, and it's a really interesting experience. One thing I found is that the machines are not very ergonomic. Sometimes when I'm producing a part, I'm stooping, right? Or I'm squinting to look at some measurement line, the graduations on some ruler. I'm looking to see if there's interference between one piece and another piece, and and then when the piece is being made, chips are flying of material that I've knocked off the block, my piece. Chips are flying, and pieces are sort of curling up, and so there's like this, what I'd call like a rat's nest of curled material that was shaved off a rod, and it gets in the way. So visually I have to, I don't know, it takes skill to use these machines. It's not, you don't like say press a button on a keyboard and the machine does the work. It's very much you doing the work on an imperfect machine. You, with all of your imperfection, doing the work on an imperfect machine. And it's funny how that is. I don't, I don't, I don't know. So I'm learning a lot about machine shops and what it's like to live, to work in a machine shop. And I'm noticing like the noise of all the machines, like the milling machines and the lathes. They're all producing their noises in this huge room, this machine shop, and it's got cinder block walls, and the sound bounces from wall to wall. So it's got its own special noise in there. Things going bzzz, buzzing and humming and knocking. People using hammers and mallets to knock this metal into shape. It's pretty interesting to see. That's a lot different than my world. My world is a world my work world is a world of conversation and silent reading. It's a world of typing on keyboards, right? I don't spend a lot of time, say, among machines and the noise that they make. The kind of noise that I'm familiar with in my workplace really is conversation. It's people talking all around me, you know, in front of me, behind me, and the cubicles beside me. It's conversation, right? That's the noise that I hear. And sometimes it's very silent. Everyone's reading emails or reading text of some kind, some document, some letter, or they're writing memos. It's about, my work is about conversation, and it's about writing. It's about expression through the written word and the spoken word. Anyway, it's interesting to see that contrast, the two different workplaces, the machining workplace and, say, the communication workplace. Yeah. Well, Emily, I was thinking that I would take some time out and try to spend a little bit more time with you and your interests. I'm kind of interested in what's going on with you and what's going on in your mind. I wonder about your world and what you think of it. I'm a little bit curious about what music you might be listening to. These days, I myself am not listening to a whole heck of a lot of music other than music on the radio, because I find I'm doing a lot of driving. And, this music on the radio, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's not quite my style. Some of it is, and often I'm kind of surprised at the selections of music on the radio and how much I enjoy that music. But then I go through long periods of time where the music on the radio it's really old fashioned. I mean, this is music that I listened to when I was like 10 years old and 20 years old. I mean, this is like 25, 35-year-old music. And they're still playing it. This is music that I've heard. Sometimes there's music that I've heard on the radio. I probably have heard these songs like 100 times. They are so familiar. And, I'm a sentimental person, right? But when it comes to music, I'm interested in listening to new music. Yeah. Now, there is some older music that I appreciate and enjoy. Music that I listened to when I was a teenager. For example, I like to hear the occasional Van Halen song. You may not even be familiar with Van Halen, but Van Halen was a very popular rock music group that existed when I was growing up as a boy. I don't know, what can I say? I like Van Halen. I liked it when I was a kid too. One thing about me when I was growing up is I grew up and I grew up as very Christian, And oddly enough, that music was rock and roll, was not perceived as being good quality music. It was, and so actually, I never really ever owned a record of rock music. Partly is because I just didn't have the money or maybe the interest or inclination. And when I say record, I mean really cassette tape, because cassette tapes were popular at the time. For example, I liked the Scorpions. That was a band that I heard on the radio a lot. And never have purchased an album of the Scorpions. Now that I think about it, I did eventually purchase Van Halen music. I think I might have been in college. I think I did purchase one of their records. So the prohibition against that kind of music was not that strict, but it was somewhat strict. There were stories about it, about how it was a bad influence. I just want to mention just how grateful I am that you do not happen to be steeped, to the best of my knowledge, you yourself do not happen to be steeped in religion nor raised in it. I'm really pleased about that fact because I think it'll be quite helpful. I don't know. I don't think I'll even get into the subject, but as a kid, those kind of influences, there are good things and bad things about them, but I think I appreciate you being raised as a skeptical person. Yeah, I like that idea. I want you to be skeptical about the world and about the thoughts that are in it, the ideas that people present. I don't want you to be sort of subject to, basically being in a place where you're accepting everything that, say, one body says, one organization says. And I like that. I think that's important. I want you to develop critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills are essential. They're essential to daily life, daily living. They help you make decisions. Critical thinking skills essentially means that you're skeptical about every thought that passes through your mind. And I think that's a really important trait, a really healthy trait to have. And yeah, this whole idea about, say, giving one organization permission to sort of say whatever they want to say with this understood agreement that you will believe and follow through with what that organization says. I think that sort of can be intellectually damaging. Yeah. Yeah. I think having too much trust in any source of knowledge can be a problem. And so I have a feeling that you're not sort of delegating your mind to another organization. And so I'm pleased by that. I'm hopeful that you are finding inspiration in some of the scientific literature that you're reading, some of the textbooks, and and you're recognizing certain aspects of the scientific method and how valuable it is. And I think that's really good. Focusing on facts, focusing on factual information is important. And I prefer that you would spend more time focusing on factual information than, say, focusing on, say, subjective evaluation, the subjective moral judgments of others, and then taking them seriously without much thought. So, we all live in this world of extreme cultural conditioning, right? Through media, through the internet, through television, even through our parents and relatives and friends. And that's enough. The last thing you need is, say, some organization to prop itself up as a source of truth. And then have to deal with sort of their influence in your life. So, anyway. That's it in a broad brush. So, let's take a moment and read a passage from Peaceful Living this book by Mary McKenzie. Let's see what she has to say today. So today is September 25th, and the quote for the day is by Emily Dickinson. She says, "Not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door." I wonder what that means. I'm not quite sure. So Mary McKenzie's passage begins with the subtitle, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." Have you heard the saying, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it"? Communication is like that too. Don't try to adjust your communication and behaviors if they already work for you. However, if you are struggling in your relationships, the chances are good that how you communicate is part of the problem. It may even be the biggest part. I used to think communication meant the way I talked to people. Consequently, because I was bright and articulate, I didn't think I needed to learn more about it. What a misconception that was. After several years learning and teaching nonviolent communication, I know now that communication is the totality of how we express ourselves. It includes our use of words, our inner voice, our body language, our attitudes, and the way we view life. All of these affect our communication and the ability to interact with others and with ourselves. A shift in any aspect of our communication can affect the way we present ourselves and the way others perceive us. If you suspect that you could learn more about how to communicate, consider learning nonviolent communication. It is a way of living that has had a dramatic impact on thousands of people worldwide. Be aware today if your communication with yourself and other people is as satisfying as it might be. That was the thought of the day. Be aware today if your communication with yourself and other people is as satisfying as it might be. Well, I can tell you, at least for me, I can see areas in my life where I would like to have improved ability to communicate. When I talk with others, I can see how, an improved communication skills could be helpful. And it's really not only my external communication, but my internal communication that I'd like to improve. I think my internal communication, my inner dialogue, my inner voice, when I use it, I wish it was better. Really, my external communication, when I talk with others, is quite good. I think I do a pretty good job of conveying what I want to convey. And, I also think I do a pretty good job listening to other people and what they have to say. Occasionally I have lapses. I'm not able to listen because I have something important to say or something I want to say. But I think my active listening skills are pretty good, and my communication skills are pretty good too. But where I would really like to see improvement is my inner dialogue. I would like to see improvement in that. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in my inner dialogue. Sometimes I notice that there is a serious sort of mismatch between my external communication and my internal communication. My external communication seems to be pretty ordered and regular and respectful. My inner communication, it's so raucous. It's actually a surprising contrast, I think, to my external communication. Or it may just be that just because it's internal, maybe I take it more personally. I'm not sure what it is. What is it that makes it as wild, as wild as it is? I don't know. It seems like there's a contrast there. The inner communication is. I wish it were milder and more moderate. It really is. A funny thing, I guess there's an internal dialogue. There's the internal dialogue as it is sort of focused outward, and there's an internal dialogue as that internal dialogue is focused inward. How I talk to myself. You know, Really, when I talk in my own mind about my external world, I think it's actually quite measured. It's when I talk to myself, the self, whatever that is, that things get a little unbalanced, a little out of hand. I haven't made that distinction before, and that's a curious distinction. It's interesting you know, how I approach my external world, both through my verbal dialogues and my inner dialogues. It's very measured. But this whole idea of talk about the self, that is when it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. Yeah. So that's interesting. You know, I think the thing about communication is that I'm always getting feedback, right? My verbal communication, I'm always getting feedback from other people, right? And so I'm able to sort of judge whether I'm exaggerating or not, because I am continually getting a lot of feedback about from other people. I'm basically calibrating my communication with other people as I interact with them, right? And so my voice is getting conditioned by what I'd call the communication voices of the day, right? Though when it comes to my inner voice, the only regulator is my own mind. I'm calibrating against, basically, essentially my own subjective interpretations. And I think that might be why it's a little bit wild. My inner dialogue might be a little wild. And when I say wild, that itself is an exaggeration. I'm actually quite a mild communicator, both externally and internally. And it really, I've got my own subjective standards, right? And I'm applying my own subjective standards to my own inner dialogue. And that's how I describe it, right? Right? Nobody else has heard my internal dialogue. Only I have heard it. And, only only I am able to judge. It may be that my internal dialogue is less raucous and less wild than most people's internal dialogue. I think that's a distinct possibility. And it might even be the case. Though I think maybe the fact is my standards are rather high. And I have perhaps greater expectations. I don't know. It could be true. Maybe in the future, there will be a way, say through MRI machines or other technologies, maybe brain machine, cyborg technology, when we will be able to hear the internal dialogue of people's minds. That would be amazing. I would love to hear other people's internal dialogues. I really would. Heck, I would like to hear my own internal dialogue sort of separate from me. Like, I would like to be able to sort of listen to it on a tape recorder. Yeah. I'm curious, what do you think your internal dialogue is like? How would you describe it? Are there any adjectives in particular that you'd use to describe it to someone else? So I guess I'm kind of getting far field here. Let's get back to the peaceable living. So she was talking about communication and improving it, and being aware if your communication with yourself or other people is as satisfying as it might be. I was just talking about that. I liked the different kinds of communication that she pointed out here. She said, after several years learning and teaching nonviolent communication, I know now that communication is the totality of how we express ourselves. It includes our use of words, our inner voice, our body language, our attitudes, and the way we view life. So, true, it includes our use of words, our inner voice, that is the case. Our body language, yeah, our nonverbals. I think I spoke a little bit about this yesterday. I hear frequently echoed that 80% of our communication is body language. And I think that's really true. And then yesterday I pointed out just how ambiguous that body language is, because when, let's say, someone is smirking or smiling or frowning, are they sad, or maybe they just ate something sour? It's really hard to tell. It's really hard to interpret somebody else's body language. For example, let's say someone has their arms crossed like this. What does that mean? Could it mean that they're trying to protect themselves? Or maybe they're just cold. Maybe they forgot their jacket. It's hard to tell. Let's say someone is doing this with their fingers. Is it that they're bored? Or maybe they're just feeling energetic in the moment. Maybe they want to get outside and do some exercise. Or maybe they just enjoy the feeling of their fingers on their wrist, and they're just enjoying that self-massage. Nonverbal communication is ambiguous. And I was also mentioning yesterday that verbal communication is quite ambiguous too. Anyway, what else she says? She talked about attitudes. Yeah. And the way we view life. Yeah, our words, each word we use, it's a very subtle indicator of our worldview. It's a subtle indicator of our perspective. There's, let's say you can call someone, not that I would ever call anyone, well, you could call someone, you could call someone annoying, or you could call them assertive, right? There's different, there's, depending on the word you use to describe a person, that word says a lot of, it doesn't just sort of convey the present behavior, but there's also an undertone, a connotation associated with that word, the words that you use to describe your external reality. Words are your worldview. Or at least what they can do is they can even create a worldview. If you didn't have one, by applying a certain word to a certain external situation, you're creating a worldview. You're creating meaning. By choosing a word, you're choosing a meaning. And so, I think that's why it's really important to choose your words wisely, because you're creating meaning in the moment. Human beings are meaning makers, right? And we are storytellers. We're creating our own reality moment to moment through the words that we use in our internal dialogue and our external dialogues. And, it's just what we do. And so it's important to be careful about what words we use. Well, I was thinking we'd move on to another topic. Um, you know, I'm interested in identifying our common interests. I ask myself, what is it that you and I have in common? Um, you know, what what common needs do we have? What common desires do we have? What common wishes do we have? What hopes do we have which are in common? What do we want in common? So, I'd like to spend some time just discussing our common interests. I wonder, what do you think might our common interests be? Well, any ideas? Well, I think one of our common interests is entertainment. I like to be entertained, and I'm guessing that you like it too. You know, there are probably kinds of entertainment that we enjoy together. I know that you love music, and music is important to you. It helps you feel good. It helps change your mood. It lifts you up. It's just an enjoyable pastime, and I love music too. So right there, that's a common interest. We enjoy entertainment and we enjoy music. I like that. I would like to explore that common interest, music. Another common interest I think we have is photography. I think you have you've been maybe developing, or at least for a time, you had an interest in photography. I know you put together a nice little video for us, and you've been, in the past, you've submitted to me through text messages photographs that you've taken. And I myself enjoy photography. I'm really focused on photography now, in fact. And, that's a form of entertainment. And that is taking photographs. It's also related to building skills, to skill building activity. You know, Taking good photographs is an art form. And it's kind of fun to sort of explore and examine your style of expressing yourself through photographs. And that's pretty neat. So, already we've identified a few common interests. We enjoy entertainment, probably through music and through photography. It's these activities are enjoyable, right? Music and photography. Let's see, what other things in the entertainment realm? What things might we enjoy in common? Well, I tell you, I like movies. I like taking in a movie every once in a while. There are some good ones being produced right now. A movie that I've been interested in seeing lately is The House with a Clock in Its Walls. Or, I don't know exactly the title, but The House with a Clock in the Wall? Yeah. That sounds pretty interesting. It's got Jack Black in it, and I like Jack Black. I think he's really funny. And I actually have a strong interest in seeing that movie. It's just come out, and if you have a mutual interest too in seeing that movie, let me know. Send me a text or something, and we could go see that movie together. I think that might be fun. I'll probably write you a letter about that and invite you to a movie. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. So, movies. Yeah. And I wonder if you have an interest in going to the theater, seeing a play. I love the theater. I particularly love civic theater. That is, say, like non-professional theater, high school kids, and even just regular adults who in their pastime want to do acting and be in a show. I find that entertaining. That to me is fun. I like going to the theater and watching people tell stories, and I'm really surprised quite often how well done they are. And I really appreciate that. So I appreciate the theater. I appreciate theater and movies, photography and music. I wonder if you enjoy any of those things too. I have a feeling that you might, but I'm not sure. It's just a guess. So let's see, what common interests do we have? And I'm just talking about common interests in the realm of entertainment. I'm curious if you enjoy playing video games. Now, I personally do not play a lot of video games these days. I used to play them a lot more 10, 15 years ago. And even more than that, 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I am not playing a lot of video games lately, but I can enjoy a good video game. Now, the kinds of video games that I enjoy playing are, your classic arcade style video games like Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man and Space Invaders and Centipede. I'm old school. I'm real old school. Really, the kind of video games that I like to play the most are video games that came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah, and even the Super Nintendo. For me, those are sort of video games defined, right? It's about playing Joust. It's about playing Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers. It's about playing Donkey Kong and Ice Climber. These games were a big part of my childhood. And, I just like to listen to the music as these games play. The electronic music. And, as you can tell, as I'm talking about these video games, my face is lighting up a little bit. It's like, hey, I'm remembering all the good times that I played Zelda, right? The Adventures of Link. And, some video games in the past were really challenging. You only had 3 lives quite often, and those lives would get extinguished pretty fast. Like, I remember, what is it? Ghosts and Goblins. Oh my gosh. I played that video game so many times. I dropped so many quarters into that video game machine. And let me tell you, that game was so hard that really, literally within 30 seconds, one of my men had died. I was not good at that game, Ghosts and Goblins. It was so hard. Now, when it came out eventually on the Nintendo Entertainment System, I was able to spend a lot more time on that game and got through a few of the phases. But still, it was like insanely difficult. Another game that I dropped a lot of quarters into was Defender. That was an arcade style game. It also came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And Defender is also another insanely difficult game. How many quarters did I drop into a a Defender video game arcade machine? I don't know, an uncountable number. Another rather difficult game, although you did get some playtime out of it, was Centipede. I liked Centipede because how novel it was, right? It had that trackball, and that was a kind of control system you didn't see very often in arcade games. And that was fun to play. Oh, another insanely difficult game was Battlezone, right? I don't know if you've ever had a chance to play Battlezone, and you may never ever get a chance to play Battlezone because I think it's got like vector style graphics. It's not one of the most popular games these days, but Battlezone, I'll tell you, most of the time in Battlezone, you end up dying for reasons that you cannot fathom. Oh, there's like, I don't know if you are familiar with the game concept at all, but but what the game's about is that you're in a tank, right? And you're in this simulated landscape with pyramids and squares, blocks, right? Blocks. And you're using them as defense against an opponent who's in a tank who's firing at you. And so you're moving around trying to hunt down this tank. Well, there's actually many other tanks that are searching for you and trying to hunt you down. And before long, it's easy to get blasted by that other tank. Oh man, Battlezone. What a funny game. A game I really liked that was quite similar. It had sort of like the vector graphics. It was Star Wars. Now that was a cool game. I would. Here's the thing. I am able to spend a lot of time talking about old-fashioned video games, and my guess is that you may not be as interested in talking about them as I am. Here I am describing my memories, and I'm feeling that you may not be able to relate. Because the video games of your age are so much different from the video games of my age. The video games of my age were like Pong, right? It's like table tennis. But it's not even like, it's like basically they just called it ping pong because it was somewhat reminiscent of ping pong. But it was really just hitting square balls with lines across another dotted line, like a net. It took a lot of imagination to sort of, I don't know, create a story around that Pong was actually ping pong or tennis, because it was very basic, let's say. Anyway, so I'm curious if you play video games. I wonder if you play Nintendo. I have actually been thinking about getting the Nintendo Switch. I am thinking about playing that in my car, as a passenger, when I'm not driving. I was thinking about putting a little television screen, maybe a tablet computer in the back, attaching that tablet computer to, say, a headrest, and then using my Nintendo Switch through controlling the tablet through an HDMI inlet port, and playing Nintendo Switch that way. I think that I could use my car's charging system to charge the batteries of the tablet and charge the batteries of the Nintendo Switch gaming console as I'm driving around. And, I think it would work. The more I think about it, the more I kind of want to do it. And I think that might be neat. But here's the thing. I don't know how much I'd use it. I don't know how much I'm willing to play video games again. I just don't know. The Nintendo Switch video game console has a new online service. It just started up September 18th. And that reminds me, I really got to take a look at that and see what that service is. What that allows is for you to play the Nintendo gaming system with another partner who is at a distance, right? Not in the same room, but across the way. I was thinking that perhaps you and I could play the Nintendo Switch gaming system together at a distance. And I think that would be fun. Anyway, give that some consideration. I think I'm going to wrap this up right now. Emily, I hope you have an amazing day. I hope that life is enjoyable right now, and that you're finding school a source of inspiration and energy and creativity, and that you're doing a lot of learning, and that your efforts to understand the world are effective. And I just want to say how valuable it is that you're in my life, and I appreciate the meaning that you help give it. So, thank you. I appreciate it. It comes from the heart, all this gratitude. I hope you have a wonderful day, and peace, girl. Bye-bye.